your men can have love for the truckie. Beautiful minds, but we love getting ugly. Risk takers with a clover, man, we love getting lucky. You run, we chase fire, I love when it ducks me. Tones go off, house watch, read the address out. 1075, get up off the magic couch. 500 gallons prepared for the baddest drought. Who else you want on the way when disaster's out? Can't even get a little bit rattled when you enter with exit apparel. Mayday, member down, they'll drag you. You won't get this from every Tom, Dick, and Harold, but here's a view from the top floor with Mickey Farrell.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of A View from the Top Floor. You know, police, fire, military, these are three professions that it's incredibly hard to make that transformation from active duty status to retirement. You know, these professions of ours, they become our identity. Is it good or bad? I don't know, but I think that transition is so hard for so many. My guest today is James McVey. He's a retired NYPD Aviation pilot. This man is probably one of the most humble men I've ever met, and he made that transformation almost flawlessly, it seems like, when you do talk to him. And you'll see that in the conversation we have. He's just a down-to-earth guy, and you would never know what he did prior to where his life is today. He was sworn into the NYPD in 1981, where his first command was Neighborhood Stabilization Unit 6, based in the 2-5 precinct. Then in 1982, he got assigned to the 2-3 precinct, which is East Harlem, still a very bad neighborhood. He then took a detail to Organized Crime Control Bureau, the narcotics division of undercover, and we get into that on the show. We talk about him doing undercover drug deals during the crack epidemic of the 80s throughout all Harlem into the South Bronx. 1984, he transferred to the ESU unit, which is the Emergency Services of NYPD, and he stayed there for about a year. And then 1995, he went up to the aviation division, where he was an aviation pilot for NYPD. And we talk about the stresses of flying and removing yourself from the elements of what's going on in the street, but how his street credit really led him to be a good pilot. James is a great friend of mine. I've known him for over 20 years. I really think you're going to like this episode. So hang in there, listen to it all. It's 2 hours. We sat down to record 30 minutes, and we ended up doing 2 hours. We get into how he was retired in March 5th of 2001, but then reactivated that day of the attacks and put right to the pile to go to work. So James McVey, good friend of mine, so happy to have him on the show. I think you're going to enjoy this episode. All right, guys, so we'll see you next time.
So yeah, I met you either here or Crows.
Probably Crows back then, right?
Yeah, you were still playing drums.
Yeah, you know, I have the itch lately to start playing again, but
Really?
I make everything else time-consuming. But yeah, so when you were newly retired out of the ESU, right, aviation?
Out of aviation back then, yeah.
And how many years did you do in the 2-3, which is funny, that's because where I am now, but as the fire side of things, but we're sharing the same neighborhood there.
Yeah, I was in the 2-3 from October of 81 till June of 82. I wasn't there that long.
And then you went right to ESU, or did you go somewhere else?
No, I went to the 3-2. So the 2-3 is in the 4th Division. I did my rookie time. At the time, it was known as Neighborhood Stabilization in the 6th Division, which was the 2-3, well, I'm sorry, the 2-5, the 3-2, and the 2-8. And it was the busiest division in the city, arguably.
What's that neighborhood?
Central Harlem.
Central Harlem.
And parts of Spanish Harlem. And so the 2-3 is really considered El Barrio up until about 116th Street. And then from there, it's known as Spanish Harlem.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That explains El Barrio's bravest then.
El Barrio's bravest.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that, you know, that neighborhood being that, you know, I'm there quite often still. That,
Yeah.
I don't think it's ever going to change because of the projects they put in there. But
Yeah. So
I mean, West Harlem, I feel, is getting gentrified.
absolutely.
But the east side, not so much. And I don't know if it's the projects or it's a stronghold on that neighborhood from the locals that are there or what it is. But the crime is tremendous still.
Well, so the projects are on First, right? First Avenue, Second Avenue?
Yeah.
Right, mixed
First,
in there.
second to drive.
Right. It's the same thing in the 3-2. So Central Harlem, and you're right, West Harlem, especially when you get on the other side of Bradhurst, up by City College.
Yeah.
That's really coming into its own now.
Yeah. I actually stopped on the way coming home the other night in a bodega on like 142 or something like that. I'm not quite sure, but it was like old school Harlem though. Like it was nice, not nice to see, but like it was still Harlem. Like
142 and what? Like Lenox, 7th, 8th, somewhere around there?
yeah,
Yeah. So that's down in the valley.
Okay.
Once you go through Morningside Park,
yep. So I went up and cut through the park. Yeah. So,
yeah. So once you get on top of that, it's a little different.
yeah.
Okay.
And then you got the college over on the west side.
Yes.
Columbia, so your time on the 2-3. That's where you were a rookie cop. 3-2, 2-3.
2-5, 3-2, 2-8. You were so for 6 months out of the academy. You're in this neighborhood stabilization unit with about 30 other cops, 3 sergeants, at least 3 field training officers, and these were experienced cops. And when you went out on patrol, you were either on foot by yourself in a proximity post.
Why one cop by himself?
Yeah, but a proximity post meant that there was another cop within a block. So you might be, your post might be 116th between 7th and 8th, and his post might be 116th between 8th and St. Nick. So you're within running distance.
Running distance.
Yes.
So you got to be in shape though. So that's the thing. Like, you know, I did a podcast recently with Jay Redmond, and we talked about lowering standards. And across the board, it's like detrimental. But on the fire ground, it's about getting to the fire floor and performing. For you guys, it's a matter of life and death, just existing in your job. Like, you go out the door, you have to run. The second you leave the precinct, you go out, you're in the field, you're in the streets. Like, it's about foot pursuit, right?
Yeah, even when you're assigned to an RMP, a police car, it ends with you jumping out of the car and running on foot.
Yeah, and I've seen some of the foot posts that are out there, and you think to yourself, like, how do they even get to the academy, let alone how are they put on the streets? It's such a liability, not only for that individual, but for their partner.
Yes.
You know, sometimes you see, like, someone completely not fit for duty with a squared away partner. Like, that's dangerous.
Yes.
So, is that something back in the 80s that you were dealing with as well, or not
Yes.
so much?
Yeah. So they have standards to get into the academy. Once you get out, there were some obese cops.
Yeah. Did you have medicals every year? Or?
Nope.
Like in the FT, we have to go to a medical.
Nope.
And they deem you fit for duty, and they're very strict about it. Guys dodge
I wish
that,
they
you
were.
know?
I wish they did it in the police. They may do it now. I've been out for so long. But they didn't when I was there. The saving grace in New York City is that, especially in denser parts so all of Manhattan, most of Brooklyn, not the outer reaches of Brooklyn, not the outer reaches of Queens, but where I was in Manhattan, even if you're working with some slob, you get on the radio to call for help, you're going to have cars there, within minutes.
Yeah.
And so you'll get fit people there very quickly, even if you're working with someone that's not.
So you went there in the 80s, right? During the crack epidemic.
It was heroin was still big, but crack was the main problem.
Yeah.
And crack was bad because, if I go off on a tangent, let me know. But crack was bad because they knew who you were. Because heroin, the junkies may not even recognize who you were, even being there in a uniform. Mm-hmm. On crack, they were hyper aware.
Really?
Yeah, they were hyper aware of who you were, but they were also highly motivated not to be taken into custody because they were so addicted to crack. I mean, they knew that the minute that you put them in cuffs and start taking them to the station house, that's at least an hour they're away from crack.
Wow.
And most of the time they know they're going downtown. They would fight you.
That's something I've never heard, where they're
Yes.
actually running from you so they don't lose that high.
Yes.
That's crazy.
Yes.
So when the movie New Jack City came out, now that building is a real building.
Yeah.
It's somewhat of a true story, and then, I mean, it's very much embellished, but that building is there, right?
Yes.
What's the cross streets on that? I drove by it recently, but I forget exactly. I think it's in the 140s or
It's
something.
been a while.
Yeah.
It could have been Bradhurst, 145th. That was a real bad block when I was in the 3.
So when that came out, and you were working in that neighborhood at the time, were you in aviation at that? No, you were still in the streets, because that was an 80s, late 80s, early 90s movie, I believe.
I was still on the street. I was probably in ESU by then.
Yeah. So what made you go from, like, the cop of all cops in the busiest neighborhood during the crack epidemic, and then you decided to go to ESU? Were you looking for more, or you just needed to change? Or
No,
it was
I
like,
was looking for more.
Yeah, looking for more.
I was looking for more. So
Now, is this because your brother was a fireman and you were jealous of what he was doing?
he was. That was a good one. He wasn't on the job yet.
No?
No, and he came to the police first. He swapped.
Oh, okay.
So
And where did he work? Did he work in the same area?
No, he worked in Midtown South.
Okay.
And my brother Patrick worked in Midtown North.
I started as a fireman in Midtown South, Hell's Kitchen.
Yeah, so that's a busy place. It's the busiest precinct in the city.
Is it really? I guess because you got half of Times Square, you got, even today, it's still busy, I'm sure.
Well, I'm talking about terms of volume. I'm
Yeah.
not talking about violent crime. It's the only station else that I know of that has 2 sergeants on the desk at all times. So most of the time you go in, you either get a lieutenant or a sergeant on the desk. That place has got 2 going because it's so busy.
Yeah.
Yeah, all the tourists in the world strolling
Different.
in.
It's busy, but different quality of work, I guess.
Exactly.
So you're in Harlem, and then
Yes.
you go to ESU. What's the tryout like for that?
I did a brief stint in narcotics.
Okay, how
in
was that?
between. That was wild.
So were you undercover, or?
I was undercover.
Oh, dude, let's
Because
talk about that.
Well, I looked so young, so I wanted to do everything in the police department. You can't. I managed to do a lot, but I did narcotics. It was called the 3 R's. It was a federally funded program, and you were supposed to make your buys within 1,000 feet of a school. In reality, so in narcotics, so I had to go down to OCCB, which is the Organized Crime Control Bureau. They have narcotics is under their umbrella. Vice, Safe and Loft. Maybe Safe and Loft isn't. I'm not sure. Anyway, so you go through a little training course, and you get thrown out there. And I was doing street buys with the Street Narcotics Enforcement Unit. So we weren't doing deep undercover stuff, where you're developing relationships and trying to get higher up the ladder. We were doing buy and bust. I would make a buy, and the guy would get busted within 5 minutes.
Wow.
So I would do the buy, walk off, we call it a set, like a movie set, and there'd be detectives hopefully observing. A lot of times they couldn't get that close because they'd raise up the whole block or they'd raise up the whole neighborhood. So you went in as an undercover, and the second undercover, called the Ghost, was supposed to be within eyesight of you somewhere. In reality, that didn't always happen.
Would they go rooftop, or all that stuff is being surveyed by them? They were all surveilling all that area many times. So if this is the corner you're buying on, they have
Yes.
their posts everywhere looking for you guys, right?
No. You have, so you might have a 4-man detective team, and yeah, they might go to the rooftop. Most of the time, they're going to be a block away in a car. And, they're not sitting in a Ford
That's
Fairlane.
crazy.
Yeah.
So, I think about this often because it's just the nature of the job. Most times, even in the worst neighborhoods, they don't mess with the firemen. They throw things out the windows at us sometimes,
Right.
Stuff like that. But that's like once in a while. It's not how much it was even 10 years ago. I think it's changed a bit. But I think about the PD and how you're standing on a foot post or you're undercover, like, especially on a foot post, you're like a bullseye, a marked target.
Yeah.
And in the world we're living in today, people are insane. They're crazy. How do you not stand there and just like not even expecting, but thinking like, there's a good chance I'm going to get shot in the head here?
It's not so much getting shot, but in Harlem, and it was probably the same in Brooklyn and other places, you have to watch out for airmail.
Yeah.
No.
That was even with us. We walk in a building, they're throwing stuff out
They're
there.
throwing stuff, bags of piss.
Yeah.
The junkies go up to the roof.
Yep.
So they get paid by the dealers. They would throw them a deck of heroin for a day's work being on the roof yelling 5-0 whenever they saw the police getting close. And so junkies drink a lot of water. And so they would piss into bottles.
Wow, okay.
And then when the police, if you were on a foot post, they'd pour the piss into a paper bag and drop it.
Dude, that makes so much sense because so many times I go on runs and we go into these apartments and there's bottles of piss everywhere.
Yes.
That's why. I couldn't understand why
Yes.
these guys pissing in bottles everywhere.
Yeah. So that was one thing. So that's why when you're on a foot post, especially if you're near a project, the sergeant would always ask, so you would end up on a foot post after NSU. When you're in the NSU...
What's NSU?
Neighborhood Stabilization
Okay.
Unit. I don't know what they call the transition from the academy to the street now. There's some sort of training program, but I don't know what it's called. So in NSU, you were either on a foot post or in a car. When you were in a car, there was one other cop, a rookie like you, and the field training officer sitting in the back seat. And you went on radio runs and whatever. You were never assigned actual jobs from the dispatcher. That was assigned. So let me back up. You were. Certain jobs were not assigned to you. They were assigned to the real cops, the guys that were established. Certain jobs were assigned to you.
So you're getting the scraps.
Well, not really scraps, but crimes in progress were not primarily assigned to the NSU cars. You were backup to them. But, I mean, anything in the past, past burglary, past robbery, past assault, whatever, you would do. Disorderly persons, you ran the gamut.
Now, does the auxiliaries, are they still around?
Yeah, they're still around.
I can't wrap my brain around that.
Yeah, we had them in the 3-2. They didn't go out very much. They weren't respected either by the cops.
Yeah, so I lived in the Bronx,
Yeah.
and I lived in Kingsbridge, Riverdale area. What's that, the 5-0?
Yes.
And they had auxiliary guys, and I knew one of the auxiliary guys. He was an Irish guy, and he wanted to be a cop. But it just didn't work. I don't think he really, an American citizen, to be honest with you, but the auxiliaries took him in. And he used to go out there in his blues, and I'm like, what is this guy doing? Like, you are a target with no weapon. So an auxiliary, for those of you listening that don't know what auxiliary is, it's pretty much a volunteer
It's
NYPD
totally
officer.
volunteer, yeah.
And you don't carry a weapon.
No weapon.
But you wear the same uniform.
Except the shield is a star. It's not.
No one's looking at the shield when they're messing with you.
They are.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I
They
guess,
know.
yeah.
They know who the real guys are.
So they don't pay attention to the auxiliary.
The bad guys know who the auxiliaries are, and they laugh at them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Remember, I was actually in that bar downtown off Bleecker Street when those two auxiliary cops got shot in the head. Remember that? Probably about 15 years ago.
I do. Yeah.
I was there seeing a band.
Was that in the West Village?
West Village, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm there watching this band play, and we hear, he's got a gun. So everyone drops. We think there's an active shooter inside the bar we were in. So I run to the backstage and out the back, and I drop the drop ladder. I go up this fire escape. I go through the apartment, and then come down on the block behind that block, and all the cops are coming in now, right? And then I put the news on, and we find out that two auxiliaries were shot right in the vestibule of that bar. They never made it into the bar. They just shot him and ran. But everyone thought the shooter was in the bar. It was kind of surreal. It was pretty crazy, but incredibly sad. But that's when I started to realize, like, these auxiliary guys are crazy.
Well, in that moment, whoever was shooting them mistook them for actual cops.
Yeah.
Because, but the average guy on the street, the average mope, as we used to call them, knows who they are.
You call them mopes?
Yeah.
That's funny. No disrespect to the auxiliaries if you're
No,
listening.
no disrespect. And when they get assigned, they're assigned in pairs, and they are pair. They're right next to each other.
Yeah.
They don't walk alone.
So, okay. So we're in Harlem. You go to ESG because you're looking for more. What is it that you're looking to do? You want to get your hands on the tools? You're into the SWAT side of things?
So I was an EMT at a very young age, 15. I took the state test. I couldn't be certified by the state, but my dad was the president of the local volunteers in Whitestone,
Oh, wow.
And I was always into first aid, and as a Boy Scout and whatever. And
You were a Boy Scout?
I was a Boy Scout.
boy.
I got my first aid merit badge, and I used to go. The ambulance headquarters was only a block from where I grew up, so I was a buff.
Yeah.
I'd go up and talk to the guys on duty, and they're all volunteers. 144 truck and 295 engine were a block from my house the other way.
Mm-hmm.
So I would go down and buff on the fire guys, and they were pretty slow, except they used to swap with engine 82.
Oh, okay.
They were on the other side of the Whitestone Bridge.
Yeah.
So they got to see some stuff once in a while. So I don't know what they call it, not R&R, but so if like 82 had a real bad job or all hands or
they would
something,
swap them out.
They would swap them out, right?
You get relocated for a fire, or back then I think it was called the interchange program. So where if you had a really busy firehouse, and then you come in for a Saturday night tour, they're like, we're bringing something in to relieve 82 engine for the night tour.
Okay.
And they go to Queens and they take it out. But a lot of guys worked in those firehouses because they wanted to go to fires. So they used to hate the program. And those guys worked in the slower firehouses because they didn't want to go to fires. So the program was good, I guess, but guys weren't really happy about it. And a lot of time, a guy would stay back because they're like, these guys don't know the area. I'm going to stay back and make sure these fires go out, make sure they get into the box, and make sure everything happens the right way,
Right.
They don't do that anymore. Maybe they should, though, not necessarily for fire duty, but for runs. I mean, there's companies doing 7,000 runs a year and companies doing 600 runs a year and getting paid the same. And like, I guess you choose where you want to work, but the quality of life with that, I don't know. It's something to be looked at, something to be talked about. But
back in the day, they didn't go out on EMS runs.
no, that was all fire duty.
Yeah.
Like that, those guys, they quote unquote the war years, but like they were men. Those like.
Well,
those
that's
were,
it. I
like,
read Dennis Smith's book, and that was one of the reasons I got into going down to the firehouse.
Yeah. So your brother's younger than you said, and he went to what firehouse did he work at? 290 or?
He worked at 290 as a fireman, I believe.
He retired as a chief, right?
No, a captain.
Captain.
He was in College Point briefly, I think, as a lieutenant. 290 is what, Jamaica?
No, it's Brooklyn. I don't know the exact name.
I think he was there as an officer, but he was in Jamaica somewhere. And then as a captain, I'm not sure where he was.
Either way, from Jamaica to 290, that's a good pedigree.
Yeah.
And he's doing some fire duty. But so when you guys would have your Thanksgivings, would you talk about like the job, or?
Yeah. My dad was always interested. My dad had a scanner on the coffee table next to, so his station where the remotes were, where he sat on the couch.
My dad, same thing. Yeah, same thing, man.
The telephone there, but he also had a scanner so he could listen to us.
My dad does the same thing this day. When he knows I'm working, he puts that thing on. I'll call him like, yeah, you just had this, you just had that. I'm like, are you seriously listening to this right now? But I think if I was a father, I would think the same thing.
Sure.
But all right, so we're in the ESU now. You get there because you want to do more work. You're a bit of a buff coming into the job.
Yes.
EMT, wanting to be a fireman like your brother, but it didn't really pan out. So now you're at NYPD. No, I'm just kidding with you. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, talk about that transition when you go from being from undercover narcotics to working in the worst neighborhoods in New York City, now to ESU. Does that caliber of individual change, not only with like the swagger of like what it means to be a ghetto cop, or is it a different like level of training, obviously, but do the guys' caliber change within that?
They have to, because in emergency service, you're covering a division, sometimes two divisions. We covered the 6th, the 4th, and the 5th in 2-truck. So that's
And what area is that? Is that Harlem as well?
Everything above 59th Street.
Oh wow, that's good.
Is what we covered. And 1 truck covered everything below 59th Street.
So when you come in to a tour like that, like we check the rig, are you checking like your rifles Then you're checking your Hearst tool.
Yeah, so you're checking the things that are going to save your life. So shotguns are in the cab.
Okay.
So that's the first thing you check because that's the weapon that's...
The first thing you go to.
First thing you go to...
It makes sense because the first thing we check is our mask. We go in, we
Right.
make sure our mask, we're squared away. Okay, now we're good to go.
And that's going to save your life.
Yes.
It's the same thing when I fly. It's I take care of the things that are going to hurt me. And so with the shotgun, some guys went overboard. You unload it, you rack it once, you make sure that the action's good, and then you reload it. You get guys going in there racking it 4 times, and
No, that gun is the truck's gun. It's not your personal. Okay.
Yeah, but you can either put 00 buck or rifle slug. It's up to you.
Okay.
Rifle slug is hard on your shoulder, but
It packs a punch.
oh my God, yeah. So most guys just went with 00 buck, and you could change that. So in your vest, so if I took 00 buck, I make sure that I had a box of 00 buck and rifled slug in my pouch. And if it comes to it, so if you get a job and it's in a, so different jobs, different weapons for different jobs. In the projects, we would take a Mini 14 because a shotgun is not going to penetrate either the door or the cinder blocks. So we would.
So you have like your project rifle, and then
Yeah.
then
Yeah. So you would take the 223, which will go through a lot.
are they all in the cab, or you have them in the back somewhere?
No, the 223s are on the big truck.
Okay.
So on the smaller trucks, you have 2 shotguns, your personal weapon, and then all the rescue stuff that you need, and ballistic stuff, and a lot of equipment on those little trucks.
Yeah. So for the listeners that don't really know what the NYPD ESU unit is, it's more or less your emergency services, but you're a SWAT team more or less, right?
Yeah, that's one of the functions.
And you carry your Hearst tool.
Yes.
You do high angle rescue,
Yes.
trench.
Yes.
The divers are separate.
But
Your diving unit is incredible. Well, the NYPD they're second to none.
yeah,
I mean,
our diving unit, those guys they're the best.
yeah.
Every ESU guy is also a diver,
Okay.
and we have the diving equipment. It's in case you get a 777 into the water, or in case you have like a huge maritime disaster.
So you supplement.
You supplement them.
Okay.
They're in charge. They're the best. We would never even deign to compare ourselves to them. But we have the same equipment, the AGA mask and the dry suit and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's on board too.
You don't do collapse though, right?
Yeah, we do collapse. We have a collapse truck. We defer a lot. So on the smaller trucks, the REPs, we don't have as much cribbing. We don't have the jacks to do trench work, and it's been so long since I did any of that. But there's a whole dedicated truck that responds just for that has all that stuff on it.
So you come to work now. There's a big truck and a little truck, right? Now
Yes.
the big truck is like a rescue truck, and then the little truck is what's that? It's like a utility body.
Yeah.
So who determines who's riding where, and do you have guys manning both, or do you wait and something comes in and you decide what truck you're going to take?
No, it's on the roll call.
Okay.
So it's decided at SOD headquarters, at ESU headquarters.
What's the more prestigious spot?
There really isn't one. So if there's a sergeant working or a lieutenant working, they're in the truck all the time, the big truck. And they're riding in what's known as the recorder position. And then the chauffeur is obviously driving the truck.
They do less runs than the little truck?
Yeah.
I see the little truck everywhere.
Yeah.
Like,
Because you're on patrol. You
Oh,
don't
okay.
you don't wait to be called. You're out there.
Oh, all right. So that explains it. So
Yeah.
you're out in the back. That's why they're the guys we're racing in the boxes because
Yes.
they're already out there. And
They're
a lot of
already out
times
there.
the PD gets it ahead of us because the SOD radio or whatever, they're getting in ahead of us. It's amazing how far in advance the PD gets the run versus FD. Like we'll pull up and like you guys are taking up, and we're just getting it going into a box like we're going to an auto extrication. You guys already cut the car and you're putting the tool away. Like we just got the run. So I don't know what that delay is, but it's been
Yeah,
like
I
that
don't
for
know why
20 years, at least for me. I mean, my
Really?
whole career, it's always been a delay.
I would have thought that it went out at the same time.
Because like
I
some of
guess not.
our SOC units, our Special Operation Commands, they listen up to the PD radio because they're turning out probably 10 to 15 minutes ahead of us sometimes. And they'll hear the PD go out, they'll turn out. Because, I mean, it's just that much of an
Why
offset.
wait? Yeah.
Yeah. So, and not that it's a race of who's going to do the job,
And
it's
the
just,
other
but like
thing
we're,
is-
we're there to help each other. In the grand scheme of things, we're there to help each other.
Yeah.
We know
And-
it's competitive, like anything else. Like firefighting, NYPD, I look at it as all tactical athletes. And if you don't, then like you kind of miss the mark because like you have to have a competitive angle to be successful in anything we do, especially in the city of New York. If you don't have that competitive edge, you're going to lose.
I agree, and
So-
that's for guys that think like you and I.
Yeah.
You were mentioning like a slow firehouse. There are some guys that don't want to go to
Yeah,
fires.
no, you're right.
And there were, I met guys on details, funerals, parades, whatever. So your collar brass. The first thing you do when you see another cop is look at his collar brass.
Oh,
see,
yeah.
See where the guy works.
Yeah.
And you see 111 on some guy, which is Bayside,
Okay.
and whatever. I'll give him respect.
Yeah.
But if that guy wearing 111 says something to me and I'm wearing 32, like, what are you doing, man? Or like, especially if I
No,
know a guy
yeah,
from
yeah.
the academy, what are you doing? I get paid the same as you do, and I don't do shit. I'm like, and you're proud of that? I
No,
would
it's
say
the
to them,
same thing in our
but
job.
You're proud of that.
It's nice to know that the PD has that same angle where it's like you're sizing up your competition, even if the competition is within your job, but you're sizing each other up.
Yeah.
We're all type A's on the streets. You have to be, or you'll lose. In your case, you lose your edge. You're not type A. You can get killed very easily. In our job, if you don't have type A, you can get hurt, you can get killed, but you can also get beat into different boxes by different companies. You got to have that. You got to have your chest out
Yeah.
as you're going into a
There's
fire.
pride involved
There's pride,
with
right?
this.
That's the key, pride. And I think lowering standards across the board, we're not only losing that competitive edge or that competitive angle because they're not recruiting athletes into these jobs. They're recruiting Xbox athletes, not guys playing football, playing rugby, playing any kind of team sport where they're understanding where they fit in, having that angle of aggression. And it's very obvious when you kind of see what goes on at some of the fires I've been going to is where the younger generation they're always waiting for permission. Like, should I open the ceiling? No, yeah, you should have. You should have already opened it. Don't ask me to open it. Pull the ceiling, And I wonder if that's the problem with the PD as well now. Like when they're going to make an arrest, are they looking for someone to tell them to arrest them? Or are they going to progressively go look for this guy? I don't know. I think it's a problem across the board with especially in major cities. I think the smaller cities and smaller towns, they have a smaller pool, but they can really pick the cream of the crop. When you get to a bigger scale, you have to take everyone in. But the good thing with our jobs is that you gravitate to good places, right? So you gravitated to ESU, I gravitated to firehouses that I've worked in because I wanted to do more, I wanted to go to fires. When you're stuck in these smaller cities, these smaller departments, sometimes you could be that guy, but that department doesn't necessarily have that culture, So, I don't know, just things that I think about a lot and things that I'm seeing. And probably you've been out how many years now? You've been out
22 years.
Yeah, so your job has changed. My job is changing. It has changed since 20 years ago, but I don't know if we're getting better or worse, but it's just changing. And change is good, but I think that the change coming from the political side, the civilian side of both of our jobs is not a good thing.
That's something we've always had to deal with.
Yeah.
And it's not a good thing.
All right, so let's go back to ESU now. So you get into ESU. What kind of training do you guys do? And with that training, is it focused more on the weapons side of things or the emergency side of things?
It's both.
Yeah.
So you go to STS, Specialized Training School. When I went through, it was at Floyd Bennett Field. I think it still is. And so you don't do any weapons at all yet. So what you're learning now is the equipment. Everything that's on the smaller trucks and the big trucks. And anything that's on the smaller trucks is also on the big trucks. But the big trucks just have more stuff.
Yeah.
So you're learning, you go out and you climb bridges. So you're learning that aspect of it. You're learning how to tie knots, how to handle rope, how to store rope. That's another thing that's going to save your life. That's a lifeline. Your ass is going to be hanging on that. Of course, the Hearst tool, you're doing collapse stuff, you're doing the airbags, and then just regular hand tools. Some guys have never had a sledgehammer in their life.
Yeah.
Or a Halligan, which, I just...
You guys use Halligans?
Oh, yeah.
Do you know how to use the Halligan now?
Of course.
Okay. Do you come to the FDNY to learn how to use that, or?
I'm
just messing.
I did stop. So I was in the 3-2 at the time, and I was pissed that there was just one smoke shop on 145th Street. I'm sorry, 144th Street between Bradhurst and St. Nick. And it was pissing me off because the Rastafarians would laugh at you because they're behind inch-thick plexiglass.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
So I went in, and you grow up in Queens. I knew guys from Bayside and Whitestone that were in the firehouse on 143rd Street, 69. No, was it 69?
6928?
Yeah, 6928. So I went and I saw Mike Moriarty. He's like, "How you doing?" I said, "No." I said, I want to borrow your irons." He's like, "Oh, okay." So I said, "You know what you're doing with these?" I'm like, "No." He said, what do you want to do?" I said, "I want to bust into the smoke shop and take care of these Rastafarians." So he showed me how to use the adz ends, to get leverage on the lock and all that.
Yeah.
Turns out that they were really well barricaded. We scared the hell out of them though. But we could not get through their door. I think they had a fox lock on it. But anyway, yeah, that's what. But once I got to ESU, yes, and we heard about Hugh Halligan and the whole evolution.
Yeah. Well, you stopped at the right spot, 28 truck. I mean, that's
they were
Bobby
busy.
Morris was the guy there, and that they take a lot of pride in their forcible entry.
Isn't that what Frisbee was?
Yeah.
It was, right?
Yeah. So the training with the issue, as far as like the forcing doors and stuff.
So all the initial stuff, you're not on the street yet. You're not so.
So that's actually. Do you go to training before you hit the streets?
Yes.
Because with us, when you go to Special Operations Commands, you go to the firehouse, and then you eventually go to training. But I think mainly because our job, it changes. It goes from being first and second to companies to now filling in the gaps. So when you go there, you know how fires run, and you kind of know the basics, basics of where to fit in from probably just watching the special operation guys. However, the specialty jobs they go on, they're just observing, I guess, filling in at that point. But they don't, and then eventually they'll get their training. So you guys go right off the bat. You go away for how long?
Now, when I went, it was 6 weeks, and then you went out and learned in the truck.
Yeah.
And then you came out of the truck for EMT training at some point when they had a class going. Now ESU does 6 months straight training. They do
6 months.
6 months.
Wow.
So that includes EMT, which is 3 or 4 straight weeks, 9 to 5. EPT, emergency psychological technician.
So ESU is EMTs?
Every cop in the ESU is an EMT. And also an EPT, which is a New York State certification.
Okay.
And then and then weapons training. Weapons training is a lot longer now than when I went through. When I went through, it was 2 weeks. But at the time we had this old machine gun, the Smith & Wesson Model 76.
Machine gun.
Machine gun. It was scary looking. It had a ventilated barrel protector.
Okay.
So it looked pretty wild. Now we transitioned, our new submachine gun is a Heckler & Koch MP5.
Wow.
And that's pretty much worldwide standard for tactical teams. So we had the submachine gun, the shotgun, the rifle, which is a Ruger Mini 14, and the sniper rifle. So
And you're trained across the board, all these weapons.
trained across the
Now,
board.
when you come in, are you like, all right, James, today you're the sniper, and that's a position that you hold for the entire tour,
No.
or no?
So whoever is assigned, so when you get in, so we covered, like I said, 59th Street and above. If you have the personnel, you put out 3 of the smaller trucks, which they call cars.
Okay.
So it's the Adam car, the Boy car, and the Charlie car. So Adam covers the 6th Division. Boy covers the 4th Division. Charlie covers the 5th Division. Of course, if the job is big enough, you go wherever. But if there's a job that needs weapons and it's within your area of patrol as the Adam car, you get the weapons. And the next guy's in, the Boy car coming into your assigned territory for that day, they're going to take the door. They'll be the door team, or they'll be on the fire escape, or whatever. And there's, so the guys that are either on the door or the fire escape, they may take weapons too. So definitely if you're on the fire escape and you're talking about a barricade, you're going to have some sort of long weapon with you, probably a machine gun, and because you can sling it easier. But they may have fiber optics out there. They may be putting microphones on the window. We have a specialized unit for that too. If the job is big enough, we call them in.
I had a fire once where I've had a few fires where EDPs barricaded themselves and lit the apartment on fire.
Yeah.
I had one particular one, though, where they held us back until ESU arrived, and you could hear the fire progressing, because the chief was out front, but they wouldn't commit units to the building. They actually kept us in the staging area as the building's on fire until they gained control or tried to get this guy. So they sent us in because the fire was starting to progress to take over the building, and
Right.
so we go in, we get up to the fire floor, and this guy's still inside, and he's shooting through the door, and NYPD was up there, and we're like hanging low as they're shooting through the door, it was crazy. The OV gets on the radio and says, that's the guy that comes in through the window,
Yeah.
says they're going to be delayed because the perp's on the fire escape, so it's kind of funny, but it's incredible how many people barricade themselves into apartments and then set them on fire.
Yeah.
It happens like daily in New York City.
Yeah, I've been on many of those. Matter of fact, that episode of, actually, I'm not sure if it was on Cops. It wasn't. But there was a job. I went in, and it was, what do we call the people that hoard everything? When you go into the apartment, and it's just...
We call them Collier's Mansions.
That's it,
We can't
Collier's
call them
Mansion.
anymore because of how
Really?
the world's changing. Yes, this is the new language we have to use.
Yeah.
We call it clutter condition.
Oh, well, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
Yeah, oh yeah.
We went into a place. The guy had chased the precinct cops out with a butcher knife. And they told us, they said, look, it's a Collier's Mansion. There's, and I'm talking, there were just narrow tunnels, just one person could get through. And you had everything in there. Old phonographs and books and bicycles and furniture. And you know exactly.
Oh yeah.
So we go in, and the guy comes at us with he's got the knife, and he's got a hammer, and he had duct taped them both to his wrists. So I was the first one in, being the shortest guy. A lot of times I was the first one in with the shield. So I have a ballistic shield with me, which has a viewing port. And this guy's coming at us, so we back up. We can only back up single file because that's the only way we could go in. So we have like a fire extinguisher sized mace container, or pepper gas. So we use that on them, no effect. So we back out. Now we're going to go in with a taser. And we smell smoke. We're like, I think this guy's got a fire going. But it was just smoke at that point. It wasn't heavy smoke. So again, we tase the guy, nothing happens. We back out. We go in again. This time he comes at us with a running chainsaw. He comes out of the back room with a running chainsaw. Now we start back, because now the ballistic shield, I'm pretty sure is going to be able to stop it, but he comes right up on us.
When comes the point of that you kill him, though?
2 seconds after this. So we're all backing out, and the guy behind me trips, I trip over him, I go down. The designated shooter, who's like the last guy in line, took the guy out. I think 3 shots.
Three shots.
Took him out with 3 shots.
Now, when you guys are in a hallway, do you guys tie off to a rope ever?
Yes, all the time.
So it's funny you said that. I had another incident where first 2 truck were there, and all these cops are tied off to this rope. And like you guys, the ESU guys were squared away. They knew what they were in for, but there was all the beat cops or precinct cops. They were all hanging onto this rope, and there had been a dozen of them in this long hallway. And
what were they hanging on to? The doorknob? Because that's
it was tied to the doorknob.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
The rope went all the way back. And we pull up, it's blowing out the windows, like a good fire, out 3 windows. And we get up there, and they're working on the door, and I'm hanging back, and they're all standing there. And I'm starting to put my face piece on, because I know when they get that door open, that hallway's going to be lights out. So I'm looking at this guy next to me, and he's staring at me, and I put my face piece on. And before I put it on, I was like, brother, I go, it's going to get real shitty real quick here, man. You better get out of here. And he just looked at me like, yeah, I got this. I'm like, all right, put my stuff on. They get the door. It was like cockroaches. Like, they scattered everywhere, you know? I'm like, what the fuck are these guys doing up there? They're all tied off to this thing. Yeah. Why do you tie off to the rope?
To control the door. So
it was a long rope, though.
Yeah, so these guys were kind of buffing out. They thought they were doing us a favor, meaning doing ESU a favor.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so if the guy's going to light the place on fire, I would just take a position down the hall and leave the door untied and wait for guys to come to you.
Yeah.
You know, either you're going to find them on the floor unconscious from the smoke.
You know what's funny? We actually got the guy, made the grab, was in the papers, and I know the PD side was not happy about it because they were there first. They didn't get the guy. We got the guy, and he was armed. So the first fire I told you about when they were shooting at the door, that came a few months later in a different building, and that's why we were held back, I think, to make sure you guys got in and did your job, because there was a whole to-do behind the scenes between PD, FD. I don't think anyone was in trouble, but they was kind of like, listen, if the PD's in, they're in. They have to gain control of the perp. Don't let FD in. And we went in ahead of them and did the job that they probably should have done, but they weren't getting in there. And it
what was the guy armed
too.
with?
What?
What was he armed with?
That guy was armed with a knife.
Yeah.
The other guy had the rifle, you know.
Yeah.
But it's just funny, like, the C has, we try to work together, but we don't really communicate well. You know, it's like we can both be at the same incident. We're not even looking at each other a lot of times. And I try to make that relationship, especially with ESU, if we're on the highway doing something, they kind of like, hey, what's up, brother? You know, and like most times guys are cool now. I think those days of like the real fighting, I think they're kind of gone now.
Oh, I think they were gone a long time ago. I talked to the pilots that I hire now are all NYPD guys.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and some of them were ESU, and they said that that so-called battle of the badges from the late '80s, '90s, all that's gone. So
I think in all my time, I've only had one bad incident, and that was at a pin job. And the cop he was just an asshole, and that's the bottom line. I didn't write it off to ESU. I just wrote it off that guy's just not a cool guy, and that was it.
I only had one incident, and it was an elevator job.
Yeah.
And they were about to rip the door off. I was like, whoa, hold on, because you ripped the door off. Open shaft. Yep. Now some poor cop has to stay here.
Yep.
Said we'll get the guy out. The guy's like, Because we were here first. I'm like, so I look at the captain just, the fire captain. I was like, look, I'll have that guy, let's make a deal. We'll have that guy out in 5 minutes, and they're talking to him.
I have a good proposal. I would love to give ESU all the elevators in the city. How's that sound?
We really don't want it.
Nobody wants them. Housing should have a unit, elevator unit, that's the emergency crew. That's what should really happen. So let's transition now. So we're in ESU, go through the training. What sparked your interest in aviation now? Because ultimately that's your legacy, the NYPD, is aviation, and that's what you're doing. So aviation became like almost a second life to you.
Yeah, so part of the training in ESU is rappelling out of the helicopters. And for several reasons. Could be a tactical job, could be a high-rise fire, like say the first World Trade Center.
Are you working for that?
I was off. But ESU did respond. And some battalion chief got pissed off that said we're grandstanding. No, that's what we're supposed to do. Rappel down and remove any obstructions, antennas or whatever, so that you can actually land the helicopter to deploy fire crews from the top down.
You know what's funny? Like, that's your training?
Yeah.
That's not our training. This is the first time I've ever heard that. Now, maybe
Really?
Maybe at the command level, the highest level of the chiefs know this, but for us, I've never heard that in my life.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh.
It's not like you learned that in Proby school. Maybe. But all right, go on. So you're in aviation. You're doing the rappelling, and you kind of follow.
So we do. You do your initial training, and then you go back to specialized training once a year. You go back to STS once a year. We also do training at Camp Smith, up an Army base upstate New York, to do tactical stuff. But so we were doing rappelling, and I was like, I never thought that I could become a pilot, but so I challenged myself. And the requirement is you need a commercial license to even apply to the aviation unit. It doesn't have to be a helicopter license, a commercial license, either fixed wing or helicopter. Fixed wing is the cheaper way to go. And it's useful to you if you don't get into it. So that's what I figured. I'm going to get my license. If I get into aviation, great. If not, I still have this fixed wing license I can use for pleasure, or maybe transition to something paying on the way out. Well, I got lucky. I put myself through flight school. I got my private license out of MacArthur on Long Island. At the time, I was living in Nassau County in Carl Place. So I was driving to Islip before my 4 to 12s, after my day tours, trying to get the training in. I got my private license, and then I had to build up to 200 hours to be able to take the commercial training and take the test. And that's what I did. I did that in California. By the time,
The job sent you there, or no? You went on your own?
I went on my own. I paid for it. So
wow.
By this time, I had 15 years on the job. So I had a lot of vacation time. I took it all. I went to California and banged out the commercial. I did one better, though. I got the instrument rating, which is not required, but which made me highly more desirable than someone with just a commercial license. And the fact that I was in SOD helped, because aviation, harbor, emergency service, at the time mounted was in SOD, so it was in the same division. And another thing that helped me is there were 2 guys in aviation. In between the time I got back from California and applied to the aviation unit and the time I got in, 2 guys in aviation screwed up badly and got bounced.
Oh, wow.
So that never happens. So you get 2 openings at once, and I got one.
And what year was that?
That was 95.
95, okay.
Yep.
So making that transition from ESU as far as the truck, is there a pay jump to aviation, or is
once you get checked out as an aviation unit pilot, you do get flight pay. Flight pay. It's not much. It's about $2,000 a year.
Now, I just want to say something before I get, because it just popped in, and we've talked about this before in the past, but what you guys do, I'm getting goosebumps and teary-eyed thinking about it. At our funerals, when you do the flyovers, it's I can't even put it into words what it's like to be at attention in the lineup, and you guys do your flyover, and it's so perfectly planned. And I've asked you in the past how you pull that off.
Yeah.
But it's like to the second that you fly over during taps.
Yes.
How does that happen?
The way it happens is, so the ceremonial unit is, so there are guys that are assigned to the ceremonial unit, that's all they do. There aren't that many. And then there are guys that are part of the ceremonial unit that are on patrol. And when there's a job, they get pulled in. They're all guys that are in good shape, well-groomed. So the head of the ceremonial unit and aviation over the years, we got together, we know how long TAPS is going to take to play. And the idea is for us, you should only start hearing the rotors of the approaching helicopters as TAPS is ending.
I'm getting goosebumps. You're just telling
man.
it because,
Well,
but you have it down like you said. So you're hovering at a certain point. What's that point from where that church is?
it's 2 miles away, because if you any closer, you'd hear us.
Yeah.
And we're not hovering. We're actually doing a racetrack.
Okay.
And that's some of the most stressful flying you're going to do, because we don't do formation flying that often. You got 6 helicopters, depending on who it is that you're burying. But it's generally 6 helicopters, minimum. Sometimes Nassau and Suffolk jump in.
Really?
You have more. But formation flying, you're pretty close. And the guy that, so every helicopter that's in front of you is throwing off a wake, a rotor wake. So you have to fly above that, so you're not getting burbled. And you also have to get the right distance. So you're doing this, and when you're turning, the inside guy has got to drop power out, just like on a racetrack. And the guys on the outside have to pull power in to stay in formation, because the guys on the outside have to go faster, the guys on the inside have to turn.
Now, do you practice this? Like, say there's a line of duty death for the FDNY, and it's on Tuesday. On Sunday, are you guys out there practicing, or is it just like, you know what, we guys, let's go?
So you don't practice it, but you have a briefing, you have a safety officer who goes over the basics, and they'll be like, okay, it's name of the church is St. Francis de Sales, it's located here. Our staging point is going to be over, this high school football field, and then they give the assignments. McVey, Kelly, you're in number 4, and then they give the assignments out. The 2 412s, the rescue helicopter, the biggest ones, they're in the back.
You guys fly 2 pilots per helicopter?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, all the time.
Always.
So
And it's your same partner always?
no,
Okay.
no, it's not. It's the same squad usually. You're working with the same 8 guys usually.
Okay. Because I would think that when you're in that, and we'll talk about this, that's what I really want to dive into, was like when that's high stress flying, I would think, right? So, but having that communication when you're not really thinking, like with us, we have positioning, and I know, okay, I'm working with James, he's good. I don't have to think twice. He's going to get his position, and we're going to have a smooth fire. Is that change from pilot to pilot? So when you come to work, you're like, oh, I'm flying with this guy, or like,
Yes.
you know what, I got this guy, we're good tonight.
Yes, absolutely.
And how many helicopters are on patrol? Versus, I guess day versus night probably changes, or the same? It's always the same.
No, so staffing, so during the daytime, you've got 2 squads working, so that's anywhere from 14 to 16 cops. Some of them are going to be mechanics. They're all cops, but some of them are mechanics, not pilots. But so on a day tour, you might have enough you always have enough crew to do the SU rescue, which is the 412.
That's the big one.
That's the big one. So you got 2
They're
pilots
they're
for
the
that.
ones the guys,
Yes.
the scuba guys go out of?
Yes. So you got 2 pilots for that, a crew chief. The crew chief is a mechanic who's trained as a crew chief. And then there are 2 scuba dives, always assigned to aviation. That rotates. So they know beforehand. I guess they go into their roll call and they say, you guys are, have aviation on Wednesday. So they know, they go right to aviation from home.
All right. And you're based out of Floyd Bennett?
Yes.
Can you talk, did you work with a time where you would take our battalion chief up, or is that something new?
No, we would, so I did it once, and it was for a brush fire. It wasn't a high rise, it was a brush fire. And he wanted to see, and we were using the Bambi bucket. So
You guys do that too?
oh yeah,
See, this is insane to us. That
you didn't know this?
there's not too many brush fires in Harlem, so-
Right,
But
right.
like, I always wondered why we don't have a helicopter. Like every other major city does, I think. At least I know LA does.
LA does, yeah.
Well, how we don't, and it's not that I want to take anything from the NYPD, but like, it's just New York City. Like, how do we not have a
It'd be
helicopter?
a waste of money because how often are you going to get a Bambi bucket job?
I guess that, yeah. But I mean,
And how
I
often
think
do
we
we
put
do
a
medevac?
chief and a third alarm or greater. I think they go up.
Yeah, so the helicopter's already on patrol.
Yeah,
So
I guess you're right. It doesn't
yeah,
really make sense. But
yeah, you just land and pick the guy, and tell him meet us at such and such a park, and we pick.
you know
them
what? What is you guys? You're on patrol from the air, looking down over the city. We're not going to be on patrol looking for fires.
Right,
It makes total
exactly.
sense. But so let's talk about that patrol now. You go up and you're patrolling. Are you guys always in the air? Is there one helicopter always patrolling,
Usually,
and you cover all 5 boroughs?
yes.
So if there's a job in Staten Island, and if something comes in the North Bronx, it's the same helicopter.
Unless you're still tied up in the
Yeah.
Bronx or in Staten Island, they'll dispatch another crew
Okay.
if they have the manpower. So they'll send another helicopter up to the Bronx.
And what are you doing? 24s in the aviation? How does that work?
No, so it's still. I tried to get this changed when I was on. I got shot down. 8.5 hours, just like regular patrol, 5 days a week. So you do 5 day tours. We were doing the 9 squad chart at the time. I don't know what it is now. So I would do 5 day tours, off for 2 days, 4 to 12 tours, off for 2 days, 5 day tours, off for 3 days.
It's a hard life.
Yeah, and then every 6 weeks you would do midnights, which I hate.
Yeah.
I'd rather do days in a heartbeat over midnights. So yeah, there's usually a helicopter up on patrol.
So let's talk about. I want to dive into this now. I want to talk about your time in Harlem, on the streets, being like an ass-kicking cop, doing everything, seeing everything, undercover narcotics, ESU, doing all the emergency stuff. Now you're in the aviation and you remove yourself from the street, but now you're still patrolling from the air. What's that stress level when you hear things unfold, you're listening to the radio, and you're realizing that like you can assist this with a spotlight, whatever it is you guys do, you're tracking a perp, but how does that stress level translate to not being a part of it, like not being able to be the guy running and tackling this perp that you're trying to get?
It's not as stressful as you think. It's more frustrating. You trust the guys on the ground, because you were there.
Yeah,
at
that's the
one
whole
point.
thing. You were there. And
You
I
were
think,
there.
Is there anyone in the aviation that skipped that area?
Not anymore.
Do you see that? I think that's critical, that like you have to be
Yes.
that guy.
Yes.
Because you have to know what they're thinking compared to what you're doing. Same thing we're having in the fire service is that we're having chief officers that never really did it, and then trying to fill in the gaps and dictate what these guys should be doing, but realizing he has no clue what he's doing. And I don't think it's just a job thing. I think it's a national problem. But I think it's very critical, probably for the aviation, the NYPD, to have seasoned pilots that were working in very busy areas, so they're 3 steps ahead of what's going to happen on the ground.
And that, you hit the nail on the head. It's prescience. It's knowing what's probably going to happen based on your past experience.
Exactly.
So, so I may position myself. We do a couple of tactics that we use that people may not think of. If we know for a fact the issue's got a place surrounded, and the bad guy's in there somewhere, but he's in the backyards now. So we've got the forward-looking infrared looking down, but if he hears the helicopters, he's going to hide under something. And sometimes we've got guys like that. It wasn't my job, but a sharp guy that was operating the FLIR. So there's a pilot flying, and the guy in the left seat is operating the surveillance equipment. And they were searching a backyard, and the guy knows a circle. So it was a heat signature, but it was a circle. So it was strange, and it took him a second to figure it out. And then they switched to infrared. And on the night sun, there's a filter. You push a button and an infrared filter goes across the white light. So they lived the backyard. It was a garbage can. The guy was
in the garbage can?
He was under the garbage can. It was inverted. But his body heat was seeping out of the bottom. And that's what they saw on the forward-looking infrared. And that's how they got the guy. They sent TSU in the back and said...
The Boston bomber, the marathon bomber, did aviation find that?
I think they did with the FLIR.
Yeah, I remember you're saying this, and I'm envisioning that moment. That's why. But okay, so that's what you just said. It makes so much sense. So something's going on here, and from your time experience being there, you know that the next step is going to be there. So you're positioned there waiting.
And then the thing that we came up with, I didn't come up with it, but I'm not sure if it was NYPD that did it, but we send a helicopter way up, like 2,000 feet for us is way up, 2,500 feet, where you can't really hear it.
Yeah.
Those are the guys that are operating the forward-looking infrared. Then you send the second helicopter low.
Flush them.
Try and flush them. So with the spotlight. So now you're looking, and the issue knows what we're doing. We let them know that we're doing.
Now, is that spotlight almost like smoke and mirrors to get that guy to move, and then that guy gets him?
Yes. So if the bad guy is watching,
I hope there's no bad guys listening.
Yeah, he's looking for the searchlight, or he sees the searchlight, which is it's ridiculously bright. I don't know how many candle power it is. So after a while, and ESU will say this on the equivalent of a fireground frequency.
Okay,
That's too direct. They'll say, all right, move up to the front. It's not here, whatever. And then aviation will come and say, aviation 2, we've got to return for fuel. In reality, they just break off. The guy that's got the forward-looking infrared is still sitting up there looking down.
Are they saying that because this guy might be listening to what they're saying?
Yes.
Wow.
And then so now the guy up above is still scanning the area, waiting to see movement. And you don't get it every time, but a lot of times the bad guy will either hear what was being said on the radio or notice that the helicopter sound is gone and the light's gone. Now he makes a break of, to find somewhere else to hide or try and get away.
That's crazy.
Yeah, it's pretty wild.
Yeah. So let's move on to communication. Now, for those of you that have come to my class, I talk a lot about pilots and their communication, from commercial to fighter pilots. And this is really, other than our friendship, I was really intrigued to have you on to talk a lot about that frustration, like you just said. It's more of a frustration than a stress. But communication, did they teach you how to speak like a pilot? Because it is such a knack that I think that it's just cool, calm, and collective. As a kid, we were talking about our dads having scanners, right? And they listen to everything. But you could also listen to the airlines flying over at one point. And I
Yes.
used to do that. And I would be like, these guys are so... My dad used to show me, he goes, Mickey, listen to how these guys talk. He goes, this is how you got to talk on the radio. And as a kid, he's telling me this, you know? And like, and I carry that with me. So like, I try to have that like demeanor on the radio where it's just very like clear, calm. I mean, obviously it takes work to get there. You're training in aviation. Do they train you to talk like that? Because it's across the board with any pilot. Like, you guys are all just so smooth.
It's not that they teach you to be calm, but they teach you to be succinct. And brevity is important.
Yeah.
Get your meaning across using as few words as possible. So, for example, well, now I'll take flying commercially now. Start the helicopter up. I get a clearance to leave Teterboro. Now I'm ready to go out to depart. So I've got to go out. I've got a taxi. So I don't get on and say ground helicopter 80 November Yankee. We're at Jet Aviation. You don't have to say we're ready. They know why you're calling. You wouldn't be calling ground unless you were ready to taxi. So it's Teterboro ground, 80 November Yankee, Jet Kilo. So now they know where we are on the airport, which taxiway we're close to. That's all they need to know. And they'll come back with taxi instructions. It's the same thing when you make an initial contact. So say I'm coming back from the Hamptons. I get to the Jones Beach Monument, and my call is Kennedy Augusta 80 November Yankee, Jones Beach 500, request below the Bravo, Flatbush checkout prospect. You don't have to say, just as few words as possible.
Yeah, so I try to train my young firefighters to speak in statements because exactly that. Like, it's just point direct. Like, this is what you have to say. We're not having a conversation. Officers may have conversations with command sometimes, many times, because it is an intimate conversation with the command level and the officer that's in the building doing whatever they're doing. But as a firefighter, I think that we have to be very clear and just speak in statement form like pilots do, especially with like when the stress level gets to increase. Take away the be advised, right? So how many times you hear a pilot say, be advised, we're approaching Jones Beach? Like, no, you never hear that because you're speaking in statements.
Yeah.
Because the tower knows that you're approaching because you're already speaking to them, right?
Yes.
I mean, that's so important.
And you have a transponder code. And so when I get new guys on, one of my newer guys now, so this is what, listen to me and then just emulate what I say.
Yeah.
As few words as possible, with still getting your meaning across. Sometimes air traffic control will come back and say, 80 November Yankee, I show you at 700 feet, say intentions. So if they had given me 500 feet before and I drifted up, inadvertently, I would come back and say something like, correcting now, or sometimes it's gulls, and you react, you aviate before you communicate. That's one of the tenets.
Hold on. You aviate before you communicate. Explain
Yes.
that.
So you're in an aircraft. So the first thing you do is aviate. Any type of emergency or situation. So even if you have a fire on board, you have smoke in the cockpit, you fly the aircraft. That's the first thing you do. Second thing you do is navigate. Aviate, navigate, communicate. So you're still flying the aircraft. You turn to a safe landing zone. That could be an airport, it could be the beach, depending on the nature of the emergency. And then you tell people what's going on. Because they don't really need to know unless they have to clear the airspace for you.
Wow.
So if I hard over or if I climb 200 feet abruptly to avoid a bunch of Mylar balloons that drifted in front of me, or seagulls that came out of nowhere, I'll if I can pull the trigger and communicate at the same time, and I've got the presence of mind, I'll do it. But sometimes you don't do that until it's over, and then sometimes I may jump on and say, Kennedy, 8-0 November, yeah, we climbed 200, we're getting back down, we had a flock of seagulls.
See, I love that, and I love that you said that, because this is something we're losing, I think, in the fire service, is that communication level where the next generation of firefighter, good or bad, just the way it is, they're always asking for permission to do something. Now, in the aviation world, you do it, thank you.
You're welcome.
You do it, and then communicate, like you just said. I think in the fire world, we have to get to that status where you can trust your instinct to make decisions and then communicate them to whoever. But like, I always say indecision is a decision, so you have to make one. And by communicating, you're delaying that, or asking for permission, you're delaying that. And in both of our jobs, it's a matter of milliseconds is life and death. It's a job of lefts and rights, either from flying when you're on the street, your private world, or me on the fire floor. It's a job of lefts and rights. Seconds, milliseconds count. There's no time to communicate. We have to have animal-like instincts. Like, have you ever seen an animal be hunted upon? There's no time for reasoning, no time for reaction, no time for communication. It just happens. And then you talk about it or deal with it later, but you just have to make that instinctual move. And I think we're losing that, maybe because I don't know if it's the me first generation coming on the job. I don't know what it is, but it's definitely a different caliber of individual. Not good or bad, just different, where they just can't make decisions. They have to ask for permission.
With the police, and like I said, I've been out for a long time. I've been off the street for even longer. The scrutiny from the media, and not getting backed up by. So this is one thing in the police department that I always hated, that the fire service doesn't have. Every rank in your department is a test and is earned, even chief of department, right? I mean, that's a,
Wow.
Yeah.
That's beyond my pay grade.
Okay.
I don't know. I think the probably, I don't know. I think everything beyond, when you get to the staff level, I think it's, you're chosen maybe. I don't really know, to be honest with you. I don't want to say anything, right? But everything past deputy, staff chiefs are deputies, but they're staff. So it's like, I think that's more of a political, it's not political, but you're chosen maybe.
Well,
Honestly, I don't know the right answer
in the
for that,
police,
so I don't want to say the wrong thing.
any
but-
rank above captain is appointed.
Okay.
Now, you could be, if you're a captain, so there are 365, there was one for every day of the year. Might change now, but when I was on, there were 365 captains in the police department out of a force of 40,000. It's attrition, I think it's down to like 37 now. But I never agreed with that. So if you're one of those 365 captains, and you want to get the next rank, which is deputy inspector, you better have, well, now it's required, but you better have at least a master's
Really?
degree, yeah, and to make it and good experience. So they want to see guys that have made good decisions coming up. Education-wise, whatever, but it gets too political. And so, say you're the commanding officer of Brooklyn, Patrol Borough, there's actually two, Brooklyn North, Brooklyn South. I don't know for a fact that they have to answer, they definitely have to answer to the mayor and the police commissioner. But I'm not sure if the Brooklyn Borough president has much of a say or whatever, but you kind of have to bow to some of the political pressures, and that goes down the line. So the cop on the street may be second guessing himself, hopefully never when it's a life and death situation. And it's the way it looks now, because we have more shootings now than we did in the past. I think we're okay, and guys are defending themselves when they have to. But
Yeah, I mean, New York City has become lawless in the sense where I think you're right. I think the political side of things has trickled all the way down to the beat cop, and they're like, you know what? Like, I'm doing my job, no questions asked. But it's like doing that job is such a fine line now of like, and if you go off that line, you can get in trouble. You lose your job.
yeah,
And
We're also in the age of, I just want to make this point. We're in the TikTok age, the YouTube age.
Yeah.
These idiots, miscreants, are out there trying to impress their friends in the world by doing things like, torching a police car
Yeah.
while it's parked, or getting back, airmailing stuff off roofs when cops show up,
Yeah.
or taking swings at cops. So you get back to your point. There are cops I worked with. No one's going to take a swing at these guys.
I almost feel like in your generation on the street, going back to the Harlem days, there was like a mutual respect between the bad guys and the good guys. There was a little bit of a respect between each other. We're like, you know what, like, I'm not gonna walk up and shoot you in the head, and you won't do that to me. But we're gonna battle each other. Where like today, I feel like it's lawless in a sense where people are walking up to people in the streets in New York City and shooting them in the head for no apparent reason, broad daylight. And I think a lot of it, you're right, it's about the TikTok era, trying to prove your worth in this gang culture. I had a run a few years ago when I was in the Bronx, and I was talking to a guy, and you could tell he was a thug, but he was older. He was an older guy. And I asked him straight up, I was like, what's the difference between your generation and the generation today? And he laughed, and he was like, man, he goes, back then, he goes, there was a respect. He goes, you don't walk up to a guy when he's with his kid and mess with him. When he's alone, different story. That's when we put the bullet in him. But never in front of his kid, never in front of his wife. He goes, there was a mutual respect. He goes, these kids don't know crime respect. There's like a crime respect, almost a gang thing, where like there's a respect level on how you treat people. Even though you're living in this crazy world of doing the wrong thing, I think the generation before what today was, there was a respect level amongst criminals.
Perhaps.
And because you see some of the old videos where like, or just maybe I'm thinking about movies I've seen, I don't know, but like where there was just like, the cops are kind of like cool with the bad guy and they know each other and like, oh, what's up, man, you doing this again? That type of stuff. And I'm sure you could have had that relationship with certain drug dealers back in the day and stuff, but I don't see that anymore. I don't think there's any neighborhood cohesive between good and bad. It's all bad, and the bad isn't so tough. They're more cowardice, if that makes sense.
Yeah. I don't know.
Maybe it's a bad observation, or maybe, but it's just, I don't know. I think the ghettos are ghettos still, but the ghettos are a little bit different because there's less respect in the ghettos. The ghettos were always ghettos, but families live in ghettos too. You got to forget. You can't forget about that. And I think that the criminals knew that.
I tell the same story. Matter of fact, I wrote a post about it. I was on a foot post, and it was 144th. It was Bradhurst between 145 and 143. And I picked it because I knew it was a bad post.
I love it, yeah.
And back then we carried Motorola radios that when you turned out, you went, you got a radio, there was a guy in the radio room, gave you a radio, gave you a battery, and used a quarter or a coin to open up the back of the radio, put the battery in, and close it. Now they just clap on. I get into a foot pursuit, and the guy turns down an alley, and it was one of those alleys in Harlem where it's just full of garbage. People just throw stuff out their apartment window. So I go down, and it was stabbing. It was an assault. So it would have been a good collar if I got the guy. I trip over some of the debris as I'm putting a call for help over. So I trip, I go down, the battery, so the radio hits the ground. I see the radio, I pick it up, but the battery's gone. And it's somewhere underneath all this stuff. I never got the location out. Not that I got the initial location out, but wasn't able to transmit that I'm turning down an alley and whatever. Somebody made a phone call. Some good person in the middle of this horrible neighborhood picked up the phone, and not everyone had a phone back then, and called it in and directed the troops to where I was. So there
Wow.
were good people everywhere,
Yeah.
you know.
I had a run the other day where we come out, stuck elevator, come down, talking to a woman in the lobby. I always say like kindness is a part of the job as well. And the frustration of the amount of volume of nuisance runs we go on, it's hard to keep that kindness sometimes. But just speaking with the woman, and she's like, "We love you guys. Thanks for coming around." And it was a project building, and she says, "You know, if you have any friends in the police in the neighborhood, tell them to come by more often." I was like, "Why, you got a lot of crime here?" She's like, "No," because I want my kids to see that the police are good and that they're here to help, but they don't come around. They're there. We know they're patrolling, but they're probably not interacting with the children like firemen do."
Right.
But and I told her, I go, "Trust me, they're watching and they're here. Maybe you have to seek them, but they're definitely watching over you." And she's like, "Oh, thank you so much." But it was like an interesting conversation I had with this
Yeah.
woman. But yeah, there are good people in every neighborhood, and it just gets overshadowed by the craziness. And
Yeah.
it's sad sometimes you see these children stuck in these places, and you know there's no hope. They're not getting out. Once in a while they do, but
Yeah, and they don't know. Well, it's different now with the internet and whatever. But back in the day, you know, whatever you saw on TV, but you know, they don't know anything beyond a mile of where they grew up.
yeah, you're right.
It's crazy.
So let's transition now. You retire. What you retired in 2000?
2001.
Before
Before, but I
So-
went back.
you did. So let's talk. Really? So you retired what month in 2001?
March.
March. And that happens. What are your feelings that day?
So,
Where were you that day? I know we've talked about this, but
Yeah, I was
if
in
you don't
my-
mind talking about
No,
it.
no, I was
okay.
in my apartment in Bayside, Queens, and the phone rings, and I wasn't an early riser. As a matter of fact, I flew late the night before. I guess after the first tower got hit, so 9 something, I guess. Phone rings and I pick it up. I'm like, "Hello, Officer McVey," and I'm like, "Someone's screwing with me because I'm retired now, 4 or 5 months."
Yeah.
I'm like, "Yeah." I thought it was this guy Tony. He said, "This is Officer DiRienzo, Aviation Unit. We have a level 4 mobilization." I said, "I'm retired. What are you talking about?" He goes, "I'm sorry. So you're still in the book." He said, "Turn the TV on." So I turned the TV on. I was like, "Holy shit." So as I'm standing there with my coffee, the second plane hits. Wow. Now I know.
Wow.
So I called the aviation unit back. So I was one of 12 pilots that were qualified to fly the 412. So, and this is before the collapse even happened. But I thought, like, they're going to need to get onto the rooftops, whatever. And then the collapses happened right after, you know, I talked to this guy, I called the guy back again. I was like, "Look, I'm available." And the commanding officer was the same as when I left. Because I figured they're going to need pilots. And so the guy said, the commanding officer gets on, he goes, "Where can we get you?" I said, Fort Taunton. So I put on BDUs. I put, uniform pants without the uniform. I put on a regular, like a work shirt, like a Carhartt shirt. And I had my girlfriend drive me down to Fort Taunton. So the first tower had just collapsed as we were leaving the house. Fort Taunton was about 2 miles from my apartment. By the time we got there, the MPs already had sandbag walls. Wow. They were standing out there with M16s. So I showed them my ID. I said, "I'm armed."
That happened.
That quick. That was.
And they stayed there for years. But,
yeah.
Wow. And who was that? The National Guard?
I don't know who's based there. I think it was a National Guard unit. But, I mean, they were good to go.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
We were at war.
Yeah. So I said, I identified myself. I said, "I am armed." I said, "An NYPD helicopter is going to land on the parade ground to pick me up." So, okay. they asked my girlfriend if she was armed. She's from Nebraska. She wasn't armed. She needed new underwear by this time. They still had the mirror on wheels. They still went, checked underneath the truck with the mirror on wheels, and they waved us in with an escort. And 10 minutes later, the helicopter showed up. I jumped on. I didn't come back for 2 weeks.
Wow.
So I was down. So after we realized we weren't going to be medevacing thousands and thousands of people out of there, so I was down at the aviation unit for 2 days. And then they said, no, this is now
Where's that based at? Floyd Bennett?
Floyd Bennett.
Okay.
So from there, I went to Ground Zero and went back to my old unit. I went to ESU. And this is before Stuyvesant High School was set up as the command post, and it was really wild. By the second and third day.
Was it by Thursday now you're on the pile?
Well, I was on the pile the first day, but so 3 days in, so you'd have a DM50 that needed a new blade or needed certain, wouldn't start, whatever. You go down that road by Stuyvesant High School, ESU had tents set up with small rotor repair, mask repair.
Yeah.
They had
I remember
Scott
being down
packs
there, and it was like Home Depot was set up in these tents.
Exactly.
And you walk in, it was Carhartt, anything you wanted. Was
Yeah.
there, you know, like
it was wild. And then one of the retired guys had chest pains, and they said no more retired guys on the pile. So from there, I called one of my bosses at the time. He was CEO of a major media corporation, and he was stuck in Europe. He wasn't able to get back. So I asked him if his company would send over PCs. And so I set up a local area network in Stuyvesant High School. I also called this weather service. They came down from Massachusetts and set up a weather station. So we had real-time wind information, direction information. And I set up some databases, and I was down there for, another week.
Now, can I back up? Before the buildings came down, you were on your way to Fort Totten. Now, there's been speculation that aviation was communicating with their guys and wasn't getting to the FD.
That is true.
Is that solely because of the radio issue?
We didn't have, at the time, actually we did, because I came up one time because I was operating the FLIR at a fire. We weren't called to the flyer, we were just on patrol, and I started looking at the roof, and I noticed a hot spot. Now, I don't know anything about roof operations or whatever, but I got on the fire radio, said NYPD Aviation to Manhattan, and you could tell the guy was pissed.
Oh, yeah.
He's like, NYPD, and I said, yeah, we're above fire on whatever. So I just want to advise that we are, on the infrared, we are detecting a hot spot, south of the stairwell, or whatever you call that, the roof stairs?
The bulkhead.
Bulkhead.
Yeah.
The guy said, so noted. That's it. That's all I said. But for whatever reason that day.
But just recently we used that in Harlem for the roof rope rescue. I showed you that video a couple weeks ago, right?
Yes.
Where they were hovering and there came on NYPD Aviation. You have two people out the window, and I just don't know where we lost translation from that day, because reports say that aviation was saying the buildings are going to collapse, and then it didn't make it to the command post.
Yep. They were in a hover. I know the cops that were there. So, and they were looking from east to west. So they were over Lower Manhattan, and the guy's like, could be me, but I think that building moved. So the pilot flying moved a little bit south in a hover, facing west, but he moved sideways a little south. And he said, okay, I'm taking a bead on the edge of the building and a building in Jersey City. He said, don't move any further north. He said, yeah, it's moving. He saw, so on his sight line, down the edge of the building, whatever he was looking at in Jersey City was not in the same line of sight that it should be. Now, you're not going to hold perfectly still and hover, but the fact that he said don't go any further north, so if he went south, he would know that his line of sight would go like this, but it went the other way. And he said, no, this building's moving.
Wow.
And I think they transmitted that to SOD, and it got left out of the book that Brendan Byrne did. He wrote a book about the response, and they left that out. They didn't want any discord from that.
I mean, it's one of those things where, like,
But you know what? They also talked to farmers. They said, we weren't going to listen to anything the police told us.
that's what I was
that
about to say. It's like there's such a divide where, like, and I think that we're both such professionals that you trust your own judgment. But I think in that moment, it probably was lost because I think that the command post, I would like to think the command post would be like, you know what, aviation's on this. You know, let's recalculate what we're doing here,
Yeah.
guys. But
Because we would have lost a lot more than
that's the
34
thing.
cops.
Exactly. And so it's like, and you actually you see videos of cops going this way and firemen going that way, and it's not because the cops were cowards. It's because they have information we don't.
Yeah.
And that's what's been lost over all these years. I
Yeah.
feel like is that they had the right info, we didn't. And
Yeah.
why though? Like that's what's crazy.
Communication is key. It comes back down to the communication.
It probably comes down to what we were talking about, where you guys speak so clearly, and we don't. And I say
Well,
we as the fire service in general, not
And
a
this
job
is a
particular.
big bone
but-
of contention, and I've been guilty of it myself. You listen to sometimes LAPD or other police departments, so you'll hear whatever they call it. A lot of them call it headquarters. We call it central. They'll say headquarters, shots fired, blah, blah, blah. Maybe not in that tone, but sometimes it is. Shots are being fired, have special weapons or have SWAT respond, blah, blah, blah. A lot of times, shots fired. Now, if you're being shot at, it's hard to not to do that. But it doesn't do anyone any good just to like blurt and scream out.
No, yeah, even for us on the fire floor, it's like a chief really appreciates when you really speak within the context of what's going on, because every fire has a different tempo. With you, every incident has a different tempo, and then if you allow yourself to make that tempo rise, because if your heart rate's rising and then the incident's rising, it's not one person's heart rate rising. You're making the entire incident's heart rate rise.
Right.
You got to be able to reel that in, and I think that comes a lot with just communication and like I said, going back to being a pilot and even listening to the NYPD's radio. I don't know how you guys can. It's like speaking a different language. It's nonstop, and I asked the cop one day. I said, "How do you even hear what's going on?" Like, oh, you pick
end up
up on
tuning out
Yeah,
what
and like
you don't
I
need
guess
to
we do
hear.
the same, but like the NYPD radio is nonstop. It's crazy, but there's a very sense of almost like the tone is always here. It's always even. There's never any excitement, you know. Even when you hear shots fired, it's shots fired, 1, 2, 3, Lennox, whatever it is, you know, like it's just even, and you need that.
You do?
So how long did you said you were there for what, 2 months? You said, or 2 weeks?
At Ground Zero?
Yeah,
2 weeks.
I mean, 2 months. I mean, 2 years, 20 years. It's a part of our life. And
2 weeks?
It's always a part of our life. But
2 weeks, long enough to have the airborne particulates give me cancer. So yeah, I had one of the cover I had taken care of. But in my family, you die of a stroke. There's no cancer in my family until me, and my brother Patrick also ended up with a brain tumor.
So your brother, where was he? Was he working that day?
Yeah.
And when did you get a chance to communicate with him?
Actually, I'm not sure if Patrick was working or if he went in. So I initially went to aviation.
At that day, if it doesn't matter if you're on the riding list or not, you were there, you know?
Yes, absolutely. So all three of us ended up down there. Being my brother Mike, my brother Patrick.
Now, did you have any communication as you were going to Fort Totten, getting on the chopper, going up? Were you communicating with your brothers and saying, "You guys good? Where you at? What's going on?" Or no? I mean, this is
No.
we had cell phones then.
No.
We didn't have cell phones,
Nope.
right? Like,
They were just coming in,
yeah.
but no, I had
And you didn't know if they were working or not working.
I had no idea.
But then probably you're thinking, though, those guys are remote. They're in Brooklyn. This was Lower Manhattan. Not until we really get to the nitty gritty of the incident, we realize it was a citywide incident, not just the borough of Manhattan.
Oh, yeah.
You know, like or lower Brooklyn and Staten Island that came over. It became like a job-wide incident, obviously, but that didn't really be recognized until a little bit later, right?
Yeah, and you talk about being calm on the radio. Well, the Lower Manhattan dispatcher did kind of lose it. She just said, "Send everything."
I remember that, yeah. I've heard that transmission, send everything. But, you know, in reality, she's right. Send
she was
everything.
right.
We needed everything.
Yeah.
Especially ambulances, right? Send a million
That was
buses.
one thing
right?
that you would say, like, you go on to a big incident in the issues when, you see guys that you don't see. Maybe you see them at Camp Smith or at SDS.
Yeah.
So something big, barricade perp, a building collapse, something. And so you'll have maybe 6 truck, which is Bay Ridge. You see guys from there. You never see those guys. 2 truck, whatever. And as you're wrapping up and you're putting stuff away and everyone's saying their goodbyes, see you on the big one. That's what they say.
We say the same thing in the
See you on the big one.
Yep. All right, so when did you actually transition to the time when you were at the pile, you're retired, living in Queens,
Yes.
and then you made the move to go to New Jersey and really truly retire your life for the most part, but then you started a second life.
Yeah, so as you know, at the time, New York City cops and firemen were not the highest paid. We were still getting paid okay, but nothing like Nassau, nothing like Suffolk,
Yeah.
Clarkstown, New York. They were making stupid money back then, and I had a viable skill, so I loved the job.
How many years did you do total?
20. So that's the minimum you need to get a full pension. I
I don't
just
think I've ever met a cop that's done more than the minimum. And this is, I'm going to talk about that in a
Yeah.
second. I don't mean that in a disrespect. And I was just talking to my buddy about this recently, who's close to retirement, and he's a cop, is that as the fire service, we're always helping people, but we're doing it in a sense of like their worst moments, and we're coming to their aid. The PD is dealing with everybody's worst moments on both ends. It's very emotional, and it's very taxing on you mentally, and I think physically as well. But like, there's really no good moments in the PD. Like, yeah, you help a kid here and there, but in reality, you're dealing with people's shit constantly, and that takes its toll on you.
somewhat, but you are dealing with people in a positive way. Take a cop that walking a beat in Midtown. He's taking selfies with tourists. He's helping people out, and even in Harlem, you are having positive interactions with people, but you are seeing people at their worst at least half the time, if not more.
I think that cops are seeing people in their worst more often than not, really. I mean, think about it. Think about what you're doing and what you're seeing. I mean, you're busting bad guys, or the fire service, we're helping everybody. Good or bad, we're there to help.
Yeah.
You're helping society, but society doesn't see it that way. You're taking abuse. Every call you go on, you're getting abused. Where every run we go on, we're not so much getting abused, we're embraced. And I think that's the reason why firemen stay around so much longer than the
It
PD.
depends. So I was at the lowest rank. So police officer / pilot is not a rank, even though you get a little extra money. The guys that make rank, and by rank I don't mean just sergeant and lieutenant. Guys that get promoted above captain, those are the guys that stay for 30 years.
Yeah.
They're making big bucks, and they're also not on the street. They may be on the street, but they're not being exposed to what we are, or what the average cop on the street is. So that's why. But don't forget, I had a viable skill, and so the point I was making is, as much as I loved it, I was 42 when I retired.
Wow.
The hours were starting to get to me.
Yeah.
Going around the clock. You become a ghoul. You're coming home. It's getting light out. People are going to work, or it's already bright daylight, depending on the time of year.
Yeah.
So, and plus I had a skill. So I lined this job, the one I'm doing now, I lined it up before I left, which I was lucky to do. So I was getting my pension, and then I'm getting this out. I was finally making good money.
So what is it now that you're actually doing? Like you fly helicopters, passenger helicopters, right? Is that what you call them, or
Yeah,
private helicopters?
I fly a helicopter privately.
Owned by somebody else or by a company?
No, owned by, there used to be 3 individuals, it's down to 2. 2 friends, they own the helicopter, I run the business, and it's not really a business, I'm the president of the corporation. I provide the maintenance, the pilots, I make sure that the helicopter shows up when they want it. They own the helicopter, which is the greatest thing, because
No maintenance, right?
I provide, I schedule the maintenance. I seek the proper shop out to do the maintenance. I'm sometimes involved in ordering parts, but they own the asset. I provide.
And you have multiple clients, or how does
2.
that work? Only 2 clients.
Yes, 2. So we can't be chartered. Someone can't come in off the street and hire me to fly them to the Hamptons. We can't be hired. We operate under what's known as Part 91.
Okay.
So helicopters or any aircraft, for that matter, that can be chartered operate under Part 135. It's a totally different animal.
Now, these 2 clients, you communicate with them a lot? You call them, text messages them, hey, bro, we want to go out to the Hamptons for the weekend. Are you available? We want you to fly us?
I deal with their executive assistants.
Executive, okay.
Yeah. So, and then when I pick them up, obviously I'm dealing with them, but very little back and forth communication between the actual clients, unless it's, hey, listen, we have major maintenance coming up. I'd like to do this, but it's going to cost $200 grand. So any big expenditures, and to tell you the truth, $200 grand is like buying a hot dog for these guys.
Yeah.
So, but I do run it past them. We just had the upholstery, the cabin, the leather redone. And it wasn't a big job, but I wanted to let them know that we were doing it, because I had to put it down for 2 days.
Yeah.
So for stuff like that, I'll interact with them.
Are the 2 clients friends? Are they in the same business?
Yeah, they're not in the same business. They're friends, but they don't pal around together, necessarily. They just know each other. From being very wealthy in Manhattan.
I guess, that's like a whole subculture of society of just the elites, right?
Yeah, now not every billionaire is going to know every other billionaire, but they end up at the same functions, charity functions and cocktail parties and whatever. So they get to know each other. And they both had an interest in having a helicopter on call. They both own their own jets, so that's a lot of what I do is picking them up and bringing them to their private aircraft.
Some life, right?
It's not a bad life.
So, does your client fly with his team, or does he?
No, he does not.
He's separate.
Yeah.
Wow. All right.
Yeah.
Maybe that speaks volumes for. We'll cut that. Cut that, Sebby. I don't want to get you in trouble. What can we say about that? Anything?
So, I fly the owner.
You can't say that, though.
No, I fly the owner of one of the local football teams, pro football teams.
All right, ready? And
but my salary and the helicopter, the asset, is not, it doesn't have anything to do with that football organization. I am employed by the owner and his partner in the helicopter.
Yeah.
That's where my money comes from. So no, I don't fly the team. I don't fly. I have on occasion over the years, at his direction, picked up one of the coaches, but it's very rare.
Nice. So, and you were saying recently that it's time to retire, and you're gonna leave the country and move on with life. And I think it's time for you to do that. You've had I'm sure, especially with the years that you've worked, in the neighborhoods you've worked, and everything you've accomplished, it's many lifetimes in one, right? If you think about it. And now you're moving forward, and where were you looking at property you were telling me about? Or?
So I'd like to base in Portugal. I'm an Irish citizen, so I can live and work anywhere in Europe.
That's great.
I have dual citizenship. And so Portugal is kind of centrally located to bounce around the parts of Europe that I want to see. And it's also cheap. And it's friendly. Good food, friendly people. And Ryanair flies into Porto.
So you're going to continue to fly even though you retire from this company?
No.
You're done?
No. But what I mean by that is Ryanair is a regional airline, Irish airline, like Aer Lingus. But I can fly from Porto in Portugal to Cork in Ireland for $38.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I mean, I can bounce around. So I haven't been to Italy yet. I haven't been to Spain. I've been to, I'll tell you where I have been, and everywhere else I haven't. I've been to the UK. I've been to Ireland, Sweden twice, France, and Switzerland. And as far as Europe goes, that's it. So I have a lot more exploring to do.
Yeah, especially because you're a dual citizen.
Yeah,
it makes
so
it so easy for you.
I can live and work there. I can access the national healthcare system.
Yeah.
So,
but you're done flying. That's it.
I'm done flying. Yeah.
So something you just said, and we'll close on this, is that Portugal, you said, is friendly.
Yes.
And it has good food.
Yes.
That's two things that you live and die by, I feel like.
I'm a foodie.
Yes,
yeah.
But just knowing you and being friends for over 20 years, I see you on Facebook and you're cooking these big meals, but you live by yourself, which is crazy. I'm like, who's eating all this food? But you're always doing these crazy things. And I don't know, man, you're living a good life. And I'm really happy to call you a friend. And this honor really, truly,
No, Mike, please.
I mean, it's been so many years. And I always talk about my buddy James, the aviation NYPD guy, and to have you on the show, it's a true honor for me, really. And I mean that. And I've been trying to chase you around for this now for a couple months, but here we are. We're probably close to 2 hours now talking. And, I told you we'll do a half hour. You can go watch the Yankees game.
We could go on for another hour and a half, but they need the room.
Yeah, they're kicking this out. But let's go finish the Yankees game at the bar.
All right,
and thanks again, brother.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Love you too.